Did you know that your passion projects can be the foundation for your financial security? That the things that excite and drive you can help build a life of abundance? Well, that's what today's guests believe, and we think they kind of know what they're talking about. So you've seen Out and Around, right? The documentary that visited 15 countries across Africa, Asia, and South America to meet quote unquote super gays, courageous, resilient, and proud LGBTQ people living in areas where they're still lacking basic rights. Or maybe you saw the TED Talk about it. That was quite popular. Well, today we're talking with the creators of that documentary and the stars of that TED Talk, Jenni Chang and Lisa Dazols. Since this breakout hit of a movie for the LGBTQ community, Jenni and Lisa left their jobs in corporate America and social work, left their slick lives in San Francisco, and are now geo-liberated in Taiwan, where they founded the Asia Rainbow Charity Bike Ride. They've since launched Modern Family Finance, the small business they've built together to help queer people with their money, all the way from budgeting to investing. Oh, and they've done all this with 2 daughters in tow. Jenni and Lisa say that these passion projects are what helped them leave their secure jobs in the US and their ridiculous BMW convertible to living their abundant lives today, all with financial peace. You're listening to Queer Money episode 272, and today we're talking about how clarity about what you most want is the key to living the life you love. We make the Queer Money podcast for you, so please post your money questions in the Queer Money Facebook group. We may answer your question in an upcoming episode. Now, let's get on with the show.
There's personal finance for the masses. This is not personal finance for the masses. This is Queer Money.
How does your bank support the LGBT community? Not at all? For Pride in June? Or 365 days a year? Capital One proudly supports the LGBT community throughout the year. Maybe it's time to support a bank that supports us. Go to debtfreeguys.com/cafe for more info.
Queer Money is being brought to you in part by the 5 building blocks of a happy gay life. Join the growing community of happy, healthy, and wealthy gay men who love their lives inside and out. Get your free copy of the 5 building blocks of a happy gay life at debtfreeguys.com/happy. So welcome Jenni and Lisa to the show. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. You proposed the idea of talking about pursuing your passion to build true wealth. And I think as I look through your story and as we've become friends over the last couple of years, I think you guys are really exemplifying that. So in your actual everyday life. So what I'd like to do is sort of go through your history a little bit, and then we'll maybe dive in toward the latter half of the section about pursuing your passion to build that wealth. So many of our listeners may already know from you about the Out and Around documentary that you did, where you traveled to 15 countries across Asia, Africa, South America, and you met super gays. I love that part. Do you mind sharing with our listeners a little bit about that experience and what inspired that?
Sure. So, Jay and I had been together for about 2 years, and we really had wanted to travel for a year and have a project while we traveled. And, we decided, as you said, to seek out super gays, people in the LGBT community who are doing something extraordinary within their communities. Really, it was that we wanted more role models of people doing really positive things in places in the developing world where you don't hear too much about the extraordinary work that people do to make their lives better and the lives of LGBT people better. So, we weren't filmmakers, but we came up with this idea of traveling and just interviewing people and sitting down and having a conversation with them about what they loved about their community, the positive things that were happening and what their role was. And we were just blown away by these interviews that we, I think we shot 150 hours of video and made. And when we came back to San Francisco, we were very lucky to find a couple of filmmakers who wanted to take that footage and make it into an 80-minute film. So we have the film up on YouTube for free. It's in 5 languages. If you don't have 80 minutes, you can watch our 10-minute TED Talk. And if you're an educator, we have educational guides geared towards high school students so that students can have conversations in classrooms and really learn from the material.
Awesome. I'm Asian, obviously, and this project kind of started out because I was looking for people who look like me. So I didn't come out till my mid-20s. I grew up in a pretty conservative immigrant family and religious family. And so I didn't know of any out people around me. So this was just more like, how do I find people of color who are out, who are living lives that are successful and thriving. So that's really what led us to do this journey. But like, I think that the film was actually the first step in this journey that we've now been on for a decade to kind of create our best lives. I think that it really kicked us off onto the journey that we're still on.
So what I'd like to dive into a little bit is you didn't start out as filmmakers. I guess you didn't go to film school and you don't have all that experience. When you kind of got this idea, you had this little fire of recording people on video and gaining their life experience on video. What made you think you could actually do that?
Well, it was the same time that the It Gets Better project had just started, where like everyday people were recording their coming out stories. And we were watching like just what an impact that had on us and our friends. And we thought, this is like, if people can do this, we can do this. Like, let's go out and make some home videos of people and just get their stories. And so that kind of gave us the confidence to say like, yeah, like we're very ordinary people, but we could do something like this. And, we have friends that could help us. And so, yeah, we feel very lucky because in the end, we ended up partnering with the It Gets Better project on the film. Since then, the It Gets Better project has affiliates in many countries around the world in which they really, have stories of people now for those countries. But that was the initial kind of spark that we could do something.
I mean, I think there's a certain amount of naivety. Had we known how challenging some of the things would be, maybe we would have thought twice. But I think it was honestly just, hey, let's go meet some really cool people. Let's hear their stories. Let's video it. And then it kind of snowballed from there. And I do think, that's the wonderful thing about passion projects. That's why we are passionate about people doing passion projects. It really gives you a chance to experiment, right? Like, we made a film. We have no intention of being filmmakers still.
We will never make another film.
We won't be making another film. But that said, like, it was a chance to experiment. And I think, for Out and Around as an example, that particular project, we learned several things about it. One was, we learned actually, one of the biggest learnings is this was pretty early on in our relationship. We had been together for 3 years, traveling and doing a pretty big project together. We came from very different industries. Lisa's a social worker. I've been, in corporate management and tech. And so we really didn't understand each other's worlds or each other's skill sets. So working together actually gave us this confidence that like we could work together professionally, which, like not all couples are able to do. And it's not good or bad. It's just, what works for you guys. And that does work for us. So that was one thing we learned. Other things we learned was just like, we love hearing people's stories, telling people's stories, and we really enjoy working with the LGBTQ community. And that's why, we'll get to this later, but with our financial planning practice now, we're still aimed towards the LGBT community. So we enjoy that. And the third thing we learned from this experiment was just that we love location independence and we love to have control over our time. And so that's also what launched us into self-employment now.
Nice. So a couple of things from the beginning. It kind of reminds me of, you said we're just ordinary people, but I think of the queer community has always been led by ordinary people doing extraordinary things, right? That's the push to make progress is always driven by somebody who has a passion or desire or an idea and puts in the work to make it happen. And then everybody all of a sudden says, wow, that's amazing. Right. And what oftentimes we think of as being ordinary or we're just ordinary, really the passion shows through and that's what makes it feel extraordinary.
Yeah, I think, even we discovered the strength of the queer community when we reached out to people to ask for interviews. We had like 95% of people said, of course, yes, come here. Like, nice. We'd love to participate in your project. So like, it is a very warm international community. We've felt that, in all the projects that we've done.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess it is kind of funny how you almost, wherever you go, you kind of find your queer folk, right? And you almost feel safe with other queer people more than you would any other person. And I think that's kind of a comforting thing. One of the other things that you mentioned, which I love, is that you didn't understand each other's skill sets, but you decided to do a project together and you learned a lot about each other. And I think John and I have experienced this too with doing something together that's big. That's bigger than your everyday life. I think it really can show how you as a couple can work together to accomplish things. And I think a lot of couples who don't take advantage of that opportunity, they're missing out on the opportunity of building a stronger relationship with their partner.
Yeah, I mean, we fought more than we ever have the first 3 months. I think we both thought, and we took a big risk traveling and leaving our jobs and stuff. We both in our hearts thought that we were going to get married, and we both were traveling with engagement rings, unbeknownst to one another. But like those first 2 months, I think we both we kind of questioned where we were going. And you really have to figure out what your skill sets are. You really just can't split things 50-50 and expect the other person to do half of this one part of the project. You really got to figure out what your talents are in order to work together and figure out your roles. But, we joke all the time, like, this is how lesbians hang out. We just start NGOs. We just start, we just start movements. But I think it's true. I think, and every, gay movement, every LGBT NGO, every, trans organization has just started from a group of volunteers. Like, this is just what we do.
Yeah, and you have a passion behind it. And so you kind of dropped a hint to our next question. You love being location independent. And I think your story with us so far today anyway started out in San Francisco, but that's not where you are now. Do you mind explaining what location independence means to you and how you're sort of living that to the nth degree these days?
Sure. I think home for us is always San Francisco. So we feel very fortunate to have like a base. I don't think that, for us being digital nomads is not like the lifestyle that fits best with us. But for us, it's more like having the flexibility to adjust as needed. And so, we've been lucky, like we were just planning to be here for 4 months in Taiwan. And, during COVID, Taiwan happened to be one of the safest places on earth to be. And so we just stayed. So just having that flexibility of being able to shift gears. We're probably going to, at the end of this year, we'll probably spend 3 months in San Francisco. So just being able to bring our work and our kids where we need to be at that moment is really what it means to be location independent for us.
And, I alluded to this before, but that first passion project, which was the film, really kicked us off on our life because when we came back from the film, we stayed in San Francisco for a few more years, but then we had our first child. And when she was 6 months old, we decided to leave and move to Switzerland. And this was for a job, and we stayed in Switzerland for several years. I don't think we would have had the guts to do that if we hadn't had that first passion project experience. And then from Switzerland, we said, hey, we were going to move back to San Francisco, stop through Taiwan initially, as Lisa mentioned, just to spend a few months, have the kids spend time with grandparents, learn the language a little bit. And then because we have this location independence now, we were able to stay and just adjust and do what was the best for the family, given, the difficult situation with COVID.
Gotcha. And so you said earlier that because of Out and Around, that sort of informed you, it kind of gave you the empowerment to be able to say, we can be location independent. That was sort of the first glimpse of that. So I'm going to ask this question a little bit different. When you decided to leave San Francisco again and go to Switzerland, or you decided to go to Taiwan, what did your friends and family think about your location independence? Did they think you were a little bit off the wall, especially with 2 children?
Yeah, I think people think, as soon as you have kids, like the party's over. And certainly we thought that as well. But we've really learned like there's a lot of joy, and especially when kids are young and you're not following a school year, there's a lot of joy that actually comes with exposing your kids to other countries and having them learn languages, in different daycares, or just being able to kind of take advantage of some of the geographical arbitrage in terms of the cost of living. So we've really found this to be, quite a vibrant time in our kids' lives and our family's life, to have adventure, to still be able to travel, though it looks different when you have 2 small children. And for us, up until COVID, we've been fortunate to be able to have at least twice a year really quality time with our families at home. So it is a different shift of, having quality time with your family versus quantity time. We try when we're in California to really be present. We spend weeks often in family members' homes. So it's just a different way of connecting and visiting.
Yeah. So when I'm out with my daughter and it's just me, they'll ask my daughter, where's your dad from? Because they can see that she's mixed. And my daughter will say, I have two moms. And she'll go on, and explain the structure of our family. So I think doing that in Taiwan, doing that, around Europe, like it's been a different way to be out as an LGBT person. Sometimes when you're traveling and you're an individual or just a couple, you can kind of not say it if you don't want to. But with kids, you're always out. Sometimes that's tiring. But on the other hand, I think a lot of times we have the opportunity to be the very first LGBT family that someone might see. And it's a cool opportunity to do that.
Yeah. I can only imagine the look on someone's face as they're listening to, and I don't know how old your daughter is, but
she's 5.
So listening to her explain to them, probably in a very matter of fact, this is the way it is. This is our family. I have two moms, and kind of the look on their face of, okay, I'm not going to argue with you. Right? You just you have to absorb what the little kid is telling you, and they are 100% confident and fine in it.
Our daughter almost enjoys the shock value sometimes. I mean, she's so, kids just believe how they're raised. So, our kids, we've been lucky they haven't had any sense of shame or any sense of wrongness has been placed on them yet.
Nice.
But she will tell everyone, like every taxi driver. I mean, I think she enjoys the reaction and the surprise and the coolness of it in her mind. And so it's cool to see how proud she is.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Capital One's checking and savings accounts have no fees and no minimums. And with one of the best saving rates in America, you can rest easy watching your money grow with no fees to bring you down. You can open an account in about 5 minutes, which means you are only about 5 minutes away from getting your savings to grow with one of the nation's best rates.
The message I'm getting from this is if you distill this down into their simplest form so far, one, you created a documentary not having any experience in film whatsoever. And two, you decided to just live and work anywhere in the world whenever you feel like it. When you say those two things, I think for most people, they're like, that is completely outside of the realm of possibility. I can't do that. That's not the way that I can live. And I think that what it shows is that it is available to us. However we want to structure or architect our lives, that is available to us. And I think all of that can be fueled by figuring out what you're passionate about, what's driving you, and what's the kind of life that you want to build for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And again, I think it's scary when you say, well, you just have to figure out what you're passionate about, because frankly, I don't know that answer half the time either, And so I do think that doing little projects is helpful. And I do think that taking, I think the scariest thing for folks is that when you make a jump, you are jumping into a void, where you don't know where you're going to land exactly in terms of figuring out your truest work or your best lifestyle. And frankly, we're still on a journey, to figure that all out. That's the joy of this whole journey. It's with each step that we take, with each experiment that we try, with each new place that we live, and with each new work project that we do, we learn a little bit more about ourselves and about each other, about what we enjoy, what makes a good life for us.
And I think just as you get closer to financial independence, it just allows you to say yes to things when there's a window of opportunity. So even this Asia Rainbow ride that we started here, that I'm sure we can talk about in a little bit. It wasn't something that we had pre-planned and said, this is my vision. It just, it just kind of allows you the space when an opportunity comes up or when an idea comes up to have the time and resources to follow it.
So I think, Jen, one of the things that you said kind of reminded me of, you said you have to leap into the void, right? It kind of reminds me of the saying that you can't soar unless you decide to take the leap, right? And a lot of us want to soar, have the experience of soaring, but we're too scared to take the leap. And I think what I'm seeing here is that you guys have done this a number of times. You've taken the leap, and as you take it more and more and more, you start to gain the confidence that, yeah, it might be bumpy or you might be scared on the way down, but eventually you're going to hit the air pocket and you're going to start to soar. Even if it doesn't feel like it all the time, you're going to get the experience and confidence of taking those kinds of risks.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, our life, at these last 10 years, it's been a series of steps, towards where we are today, and who knows where we'll be in another 10 years. But, I think in terms of leaping, to a certain, we did, I would say we did leap in terms of taking some risks in our lifestyle and in where we were going to live. The one thing though, I want to say is like, some folks are able to do that and not worry, they're like, their finances, it's going to work out. It's going to be okay. I'm just going to take a jump. I'm not actually one of those people, So when I speak about leaping, I do think that for a lot of us, being planful about our finances is very important, to help provide a safety net for that leap, and to know that you're leaping with a plan in place. So, I mean, I think that whole journey, the whole reason we started going down this financial planning journey was because after we came home from the film, we were on a high. We were like, that was an amazing year. We got to live a lifestyle that we loved. We got to spend time with each other. We got to meet some really cool people, and we got to create this amazing body of work that we're very proud of. How do we get to do that again? And the thought of, oh my gosh, do I have to spend another 25, 30 years in corporate? I wanted to figure out some other way. So that's really what led us to go down this line of financial planning.
Yeah.
And I think, Lisa, you made a really good point there. You said the closer you get to financial independence, the more confidence in the ability you have to do these kinds of things. But I think so many people, especially here in the United States, but in westernized world, get so stuck and they can't get to some level of financial independence because of the excess that we have to have, right? We have to have the car, we have to have the house, we have to have the whatever it is that you define as, or your community has defined as success. And that holds so many people back from reaching financial independence because they don't have a plan to try to get to financial independence.
Yeah. So last night, Jenni and I were laughing so hard because we were looking at this email that Jenni had written me. It was just like 1 year after we had returned to San Francisco after the film, and we were both working full time. We had no kids. And Jenni had read this book called Your Money or Your Life. And she literally went through our budget. We were spending more just as the two of us as we do today as 4 people. And it was like, okay, honey, we are selling the car. We are like, it was just like this realization that
sell the BMW convertible. This is not fitting with our plan.
It was just like this. We decided that we were going to reduce our spending by half, which was very different from our peers. But again, the goal was, she was like, look, if we can save this amount, then we can get to this. Then we can get some more time and we can continue doing, what we've really loved. So we might be weird for a while, but it will pay off in the long term. So it was just this funny email about like slashing our expenses. It actually worked.
Yeah.
So that's it's very hard to do. It's very unconventional to do. But, we really had to look at where we were spending our money, what was bringing us joy, and really what wasn't.
So I think this is the question is dying to be asked right now. Is this where the Family Freedom Manifesto came from?
Exactly. We just looked it up. It was June 2014. Apparently, I was sitting in an airport writing this after reading that Vicki Robbins book. Right. And I mean, in the Family Freedom Manifesto, basically what I was articulating was like, okay, what's our ideal vision for our life? We literally wrote out like 24 hours in the day of an ideal life. So not like these, you can do bucket lists. That's a good way to do it too. But really think about like, if you had an ideal 24 hours, what it would look like. And for us, like what we wrote, it wasn't just sitting on a beach or, kind of having cocktails, although that's nice occasionally, but it was really about like, being in community, doing work that we cared about, having the leisure and free time to take care of our bodies and do the things we enjoyed. Like that was our ideal 24 hours. And then, once we kind of figured out what our ideal vision of life was, then we really wrote out what our financial goals, like what does it cost to make that happen? And actually, we did do a pretty extreme audit of our own expenses, but the motto that I like to tell folks and the model that we use now is that it's not about minimizing the cost. It's about maximizing the joy. So going through your expense list and just thinking, does this bring me the joy? And what trade-off is it making? What trade-off is it making to my present self in terms of what I can't buy now because I spent, $500 on this leather jacket? And as well as what's the trade-off that I'm making for my future self in terms of, whether that's a sabbatical or whether that's a vacation or whether that's early retirement, whatever that is for the person, and just thinking about that, I think it's much easier to make those trade-offs versus just feeling like you're constantly tightening the belt. So we defined our financial goals. And then, step 3 was really just kind of doing a financial checkup of where we're at today. So our assets, our debt, how much income, how much expenses. That's when, looking at our expenses, I couldn't believe it. Like we were spending more. That was 7 years ago. We were spending more 7 years ago, just the two of us, than we are today with 4 people, So that was kind of a wake-up call. And then the 4th step was really looking at where we're going. So doing a financial projection, and really looking at different scenarios. If we kept working for X number of years, what would that look like? If we had kids and we had a stay-at-home parent, what would that look like? What would it look like if we wanted to live abroad for a period of time, and just modeling out what the financial implications for that. And then lastly, just putting together a plan to figure out how to get us from where we're at today to where we want it to go. And that's really around investment strategy and savings.
Nice.
So you're both educated, smart people. Before starting the out and around journey, did you ever think that you could did you ever have this type of a discussion with yourself of exactly what do you want your life to look like and how can we financially make that happen?
I mean, no, I was like in a government job, working at a public hospital, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm just going to sit here for 30 years and
collect a pension.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we knew anyone, I think blogs really opened our mind, and, connecting online to some bloggers who were talking about travel and, gaining mileage points and, living frugally and, just reading books, and like slowly we've met this online community. I mean, this is how we met you guys. And these are people that we now consider friends. And so I think just we needed to think of alternative models. I mean, I remember, we were in San Francisco and we had a friend who was a little bit older than us who had a kid who was just starting kindergarten. It was important for him that his kid learned his native language. And so he enrolled his daughter in a bilingual school that cost $50,000 a year. And I thought, my God, that's, amazing. She's going to be bilingual. And then I said, could we maybe live off of $50,000 in another country and our kids could learn Spanish? I was just blown away and thinking, yeah, I want that for my child too, but maybe there's another way that we could get that without the high cost. And so really the only people we knew doing that were people online.
our secret invisible friends. But since being on this journey, we have met real life people, and in fact, have befriended some of these real life people like yourself, and also folks that even blogger that we met here in Taiwan. But I think it's really important to see models, and if you can't find people in your own community right now, look online, and connect with them, because we want to, I can speak for ourselves. We love to talk with people who are interested in. They don't want to live a default life. They want to create something different, but they don't know how. I think most bloggers are very happy to help.
Yeah, and the reason I ask this question is because it's not something that's taught in school. We don't learn it in the public school system. It's not taught in college. The whole concept is to get a job and to Lisa's point earlier, work for 30 years, hopefully collect a pension or have a retirement, and that's what success is supposed to look like. And then if you don't have anybody in your circle in your real life who has done anything off the wall like what we're all doing, you don't think that it's possible. You don't even know that it exists, let alone think it's possible for yourself. And so I think that's why I think it's exciting that you were able to come to that conclusion by taking one leap, by trying to do a documentary or at least at the very least recording some people who you met when you were traveling around the world.
Yeah, and I think, in some ways, even our bodies told us to stop. In my last job, I was having alopecia, losing parts of my hair because of stress. And I know Jenni struggled with insomnia and in her last corporate job where she was flying around all the time every week to different parts of Europe. So, for us, I feel like, just our health has gotten so much better, and we could just feel viscerally this need to get off this wheel.
That said, we were originally inspired by the FIRE, or the, financial independence early retirement movement. And that definitely gave us a model for how to live differently. But, it's not for everyone. And I don't even know that we qualify as FIRE now, because we actually do work. But I don't think for a lot of people, the end goal isn't I don't want to work. I think the end goal is I want to work on my terms, doing something that I'm fulfilled by with the people that I enjoy in a way that I enjoy. And I think that having, the financial freedom to do that is very feasible for a lot of folks with the proper planning, and with just taking some time out to kind of figure out what's important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting how the definition of FIRE has really morphed over the last couple of years, because people are thinking outside the firebox now, right? They're thinking about how, and I actually saw this as a meme on Instagram, I think it was today or yesterday. FIRE is not about retirement. FIRE is about choices.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what a lot of folks in the FIRE community, or people who are looking for financial independence, are doing now. They're looking for, how can I make the choices that are best for me and my life and my family, rather than making choices that are best for some corporation or government entity, right? And so it's more about what we can do to lead an authentic life in many aspects of our lives, including our finances, including the choice of where we live or how we live our lives.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, like, money can be a fuel for your best life, but unfortunately for most folks, it's the top stress.
Right.
And that's especially the case for women, even more so than men, and so, for us, the reason why we now work with folks around money is because we've seen that. I think a lot of people see money just as a constraint. It limits what you're able to do, but you could flip it around and make it such that it's now an enabler for what you can do. And so when we think about financial planning, we're really working backwards. Instead of saying, well, how much do you have? Therefore, what can you do? It's like, well, let's first figure out what it is that you want, and then work backwards to make the money work.
It's becoming really conscious and intentional. I think for most of us, we go to school and then we're told we should probably go to college unless we want to struggle the rest of our lives. So we go to college, and then we have to, at the age of 18, think about, okay, what is this major career I want to pick for myself for the rest of my life? And then you dive into some sort of a career. And I think we're kind of just either dragged or pushed along to go through all these hurdles. And then we graduate, we get married, we have kids, and we have this job. And that's a definition of happiness. Work for 30 years and then retire. And then you get to have all the freedom, that this elusive freedom that everybody promises is at the end of the work rainbow,
Right.
so to speak. But I think a lot of us get to a point in our 20s or 30s and maybe 40s for some of us, where we're like, you know what? This actually isn't making me happy. I've got all this stuff. I've got this BMW that can put the top down, and I've got this great place in San Francisco or Denver, or I've just got all this amazing stuff, but I'm not actually happy. It's not fueling my soul. And I keep chasing the dragon, buying more and more stuff, and I'm not actually getting that happiness. And I think, to your point, being more intentional about, well, let's think about it. What is it that you really want? If you could have anything, what would that be? And then let's kind of reverse engineer it and figure out how we can get you there.
Yeah, and it is a practice. I mean, a lot of what I do when I work with our clients is work on conscious consumption. So because you're right, like our 30 years while working, we're just bombarded by advertisements and marketing and, kind of keeping up with the Joneses. And, when we make these purchases, like really asking ourselves, how do I think this purchase fits into my life? Like, is this purchase making up for something that is lacking in my life right now?
Mm-hmm.
What is the real purchase? And we found that the BMW convertible brought no joy. There was constantly being repaired.
Well, I could tell you what it was trying to solve. It was trying to make my commute more tolerable, right? It was trying to make a miserable situation a little bit better. But,
we've heard that several times from people, that they buy this super expensive, fabulous car, very nice car, but it's only because they have to be in the car for 3 hours a day.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, like 6 months later, you're still like, nope, still miserable. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we've touched on it a little bit. You've since your time in Taiwan, and now your next venture is Modern Family Finance. And I think what's fascinating about what you're doing is you're working together as a couple. You started this business, but one of you is more on the money coaching side, and one of you is more on the actual financial planning, investing side. Can you share with our listeners about Modern Family Finance and how the two of you are helping people?
Yeah. So Modern Family Finance, we provide financial planning, investment management, and money coaching kind of as a comprehensive approach. And the reason we do that is because, we think, and we've certainly experienced in our true life, is that, true wealth requires numbers, but also the right mindset. Because we all know that you can have all the money in the world and still feel very poor. So I myself, I help folks on the financial planning and investment side, and the goal here is to really figure out how do we make the numbers work, right? Like now that you've defined what your goals are and how much it's going to cost, how do we get you a plan to get there that's tax efficient? How do we help you invest in a way that's going to get you the returns and that's also aligned with your values? Whereas, while Lisa, you can speak to what you do.
So, I work with people and especially with couples working on a spending plan. So first, I help people just to identify their money beliefs. And these are all things that, are unconscious beliefs, the way that we were taught growing up, the way that we viewed money growing up, mainly from our parents and the people around us. And then, I just help people to work on conscious spending, work together so that they feel like working on a spending plan is not something that drives them apart, but rather something that can bring them closer together. And so we work on how to have ongoing money dates so that you're sitting down and you're having a civil conversation around your goals, versus I think most couples talk about money, someone sees a credit card bill and storms in and says, "What is this?" And then it just starts with an explosion of arguments. Yeah, it's really fun. Like I've been working with couples, who might be joining finances for the first time and just having kind of these meaningful conversations.
I love that because I think what you're doing is providing a much more comprehensive approach than what most people get. David and I come from financial services, and we know that financial advisors, they do the investment management and the financial planning. They're not so good with the personal finance side of things. They're not necessarily educated or even incentivized on that, so they don't spend a whole lot of time helping their people. Let's talk about a budget. They might recommend a budgeting app or maybe share an Excel spreadsheet, but that's kind of it. They won't dive into, well, why are you spending this way? And are you spending in a way that makes you happy? So I think it's wonderful what you're doing. But I love that the twist that you have is that this is modern family finance. What makes it so modern?
Good question. We are serving the LGBTQ community, and, the LGBT community has unique needs, which you two have spoken a lot about through the work that you have done, right? And I think many more of us are unmarried. Maybe we are in a partnership, but we're unmarried. And that has many implications on taxes, on estate planning, on how we join our finances as a couple. We have less of a family social safety net. And that's very scary when we think about retirement and we think about things like long-term care. So how do we make sure that we're able to take care of ourselves in our older age? There's obviously a higher cost of having children. And you guys have called out many times that we end up often living in more expensive cities because those are the cities where we feel more safe and accepted. And so that creates more of a financial burden. So, all this, plus more has led us, we want to specialize in helping to work with our community. And, like we said, part of our learning from the Passion Project and Without and Around is that we love working with our community. It's a lot of fun, working with people who are like us and hopefully, can resonate with us.
This is kind of a new venture for you. Are you starting to see any common trends when you sit down with people for the first time? Have they had these kind of deep discussions before? Are they kind of surprised by the direction you're trying to take them?
Yeah, I think, so one of the exercises I do is I do a timeline with people like in our first session. So like, I think a lot of people, like they sit down and like, okay, what are your goals? Let's see, let's project the next 30 years. And what I do with people first is just say, okay, let's just look at your last 30, 40 years. Like, tell me about your positive and negative experiences with money. And it can get quite emotional, actually, for some people. Like, they haven't really thought about their money journey or like how money has flowed in or out of their lives, or like, some of the painful experiences that have happened with money. I think there is this kind of unique bond because people feel like, oh, you're a lesbian. You kind of get it when I talk about, how painful this is to plan for, how much money I lost trying to have a baby, or the amount of money I need to save for top surgery, or, whatever, or how painful this was when, my family kicked me out of the house and wouldn't support me financially. So it helps to kind of just know what money means to people in their life's journey thus far, because that actually gives you a lot of information about maybe why their spending plan is what it is. And so those have been really meaningful conversations.
And I think on the, more investing side, what I've seen, especially with women, is it's kind of a fear-based approach of hoarding cash, where it's like this concern that, I have to conserve what I have and I have to protect what I have, which is important too, but then they miss out on the opportunity of growth that comes from investment. So a lot of that is just, again, this is why we think the whole mindset and numbers combination is so important, is because, that is driven by mindset, right? It's like this fear of not having enough. But then it results in very real financial implications, because when a woman, maybe leaves their money in cash, and there's a lot of statistics that show that women are far more conservative and leave much more of their assets in cash than men, you end up with lower financial returns, and women retire on par. If you take a similar woman to a similar man, they retire with only 2/3 of the assets of that man. So a lot of that is helping women work through and being okay with taking some risk, because they need to do that in order to reach their financial goals.
Nice.
I love that. Do you find that all of these challenges are easier to overcome when people figure out what their passions are and what their passion projects will be?
I think it can go in any order. I think sometimes you might come in and say, you might have a client that comes in and says, I really want to start a brewery, and they have this idea in their head. And so therefore that's what's driving this desire for a financial change, because they want to support that. Other folks, and I think myself, I would fall into this category, is like, I didn't know exactly what my passion was, but I knew it wasn't, I knew I wanted a different life. And I think that having the financial plan in place and a safety net in place can give you the confidence to step out into that void that we were talking about earlier and to experiment. I think that either way path you go, whether you think you know or whether you don't know what your passion is, there's going to be a period of time in which you don't know, where it feels like, well, I thought I liked having this brewery, but actually I'm not sure, or you're like, I thought I liked painting, but actually I hate it, and I think it's an experiment. But I mean, again, I think that's the joy and adventure of life, is just trying things and figuring it out. And the whole point is to really get to know yourself better and figure out what a meaningful life is to you. And you can't really figure that out in a vacuum, right? And so, and we were a little bit extreme. Like, we actually took a complete jump from corporate. We moved to different countries. But for some folks, maybe it's just a 1 month sabbatical, or maybe it's even just like a 1 week vacation and just go somewhere, just get out of your normal life, for a while and think about these questions.
It almost sounds to me like what you're saying is your passion project first needs to be figuring yourself out. And when you figure yourself out, then you can figure out how all of the other pieces can fit together, whether it's the financial piece or the passion project or the lifestyle design part of it.
I think you're right. I mean, thank you for articulating that. I mean, I honestly, I think everything we do, like all of our journeys for Lisa and I, the work that we do, it's all in part a way to figure ourselves out and to express ourselves and hopefully help some folks as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's the point of life, right?
Right.
As the Buddhists would say.
Exactly. And I think it's you guys are definitely helping people do that. And I think in everything that you've all these different little and big passion projects you've taken, you've really been doing that for people. So I think that's wonderful. I think this has been a great discussion. Where can our listeners follow you, connect with you, keep up with all the things that you're doing?
Yeah, so they can follow us on our website at modernfamilyfinance.com. And that will have links to our film as well as the charity bike ride that we run here in Taiwan.
And all of our social media, emails, et cetera, et cetera. But we love to hear from folks, like if you want to have a money chat, contact us contact us there. We're happy to do that. Or just send us an email.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate having you on the show finally.
Yeah,
thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by Capital One. Capital One is redesigning the banking experience by offering simple, straightforward, and seamless ways for you to bank from almost anywhere. So banking fits into your life, not the other way around.
Join our movement to build a community of happier, healthier, and wealthier gay men by getting your free copy of the 5 building blocks of a happy gay life at debtfreeguys.com/happy. Thank you, Jenni and Lisa, for sharing your amazing stories and your brilliant take on living the life you love, all with abundance, both personal and financial. To you, our listeners, here's your Queer Money takeaway from this episode. You've heard this before, but it bears repeating. Get crystal clear on what matters most to you. Eliminate all the bullshit everyone has projected onto you and get clear on what you most want in life. Start living your life designing your life accordingly. Remember, we make the Queer Money podcast for you, so please post your money questions in the Queer Money Facebook group. We may answer your question in an upcoming episode. Thank you, and we'll talk with you next week.